for his money, but she didn't know that he had heard everything. At the wedding, the billionaire prepared a surprise that shocked all the guests in the whole country. Subscribe and write where you're watching from. Jamal's earliest memories were of cracked sidewalks and the smell of dust rising from the streets when the sun pounded the pavement. The neighborhood was loud, children running barefoot past windows with peeling paint, mothers shouting from doorways as laundry flapped on lines tied between rusting poles. Jamal remembered his mother's hands, rough and warm, brushing crumbs off the counter while she whispered prayers under her breath, hoping for another day to find enough to keep the lights on. She was the kind of woman who smiled even when her eyes were tired, who told Jamal that they were rich in spirit even if their pockets were empty, who would slip him half of her dinner on nights she thought he was still hungry, hoping he wouldn't notice her stomach was empty. Those days carved themselves deep into Jamal's bones, shaping him quietly while he walked to school past men arguing about broken cars and unpaid bills. In the evenings, he would help his mother clean offices downtown, the city lights shining through glass towers, revealing a world of silent elevators and polished floors that smelled of lemon and steel. Jamal would look out the windows as he wiped fingerprints off the glass, staring at the stars reflected in skyscraper glass, telling himself that one day he would be up there too, but not just to clean the windows. He remembered the day his mother died, her tired breath leaving her chest as she held his hand. Her last words, cracked and soft, were, "Don't let money change who you are." He was 17, alone, and standing beside a hospital bed with a world of debt and the scent of antiseptic clinging to him like a second skin. That night, he made a promise to himself, staring at the cracked ceiling of their small apartment, that he would rise, that he would never again be powerless, that he would take every ounce of pain and build something out of it. Jamal worked days at a mechanic's shop, his hands stained with oil and sweat, while at night he took classes, studying economics, finance, and computer programming under the glow of a borrowed laptop screen. His mother's words stayed with him, shaping the decisions he made when others told him to take shortcuts, to cheat, to lie for a quick dollar. He refused. Even when the bills piled up, when hunger gnawed at him, when exhaustion clouded his eyes, he would not sell the integrity she had taught him to keep. Years passed, and slowly Jamal built himself out of those long nights and aching days. His first startup failed, the second nearly broke him, but the third, an innovative logistics platform designed to help small businesses deliver efficiently, took off, catching the attention of investors who saw not only his brilliance but the relentless determination in his eyes. He built a company that valued transparency and honesty, one that provided jobs to others who had stories like his, who needed a chance, who needed someone to believe in them when the world would not. By 32, Jamal was a millionaire, then a multimillionaire, and as he moved through the marble-floored hallways of his offices, people stepped aside, nodding with respect. He bought a mansion on the hill overlooking the city, a place with high ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows, gardens that bloomed with roses and lavender, a fountain that sparkled in the sun. In his garage, vintage cars gleamed under soft lighting, each one a symbol of the roads he had taken to arrive where he was. But as the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Jamal found himself sitting alone at the long dining table, the echo of his footsteps in hallways too grand for a single man, the hum of silence pressing against him as he tried to eat dinners prepared by chefs he hardly knew. At night, he would walk out onto the balcony, the lights of the city spread before him like a sea of stars, and he would remember the way his mother would hum softly while washing dishes, the way their small apartment felt full even when it was empty because they had each other. He tried to fill the emptiness with charity, funding programs for youth, scholarships, and neighborhood initiatives that provided food and safe spaces for children like the boy he once was. The children would run to him when he visited, shouting his name, hugging his legs, their laughter ringing in the air like music. He would smile, ruffle their hair, and hand out toys and books, but when he returned home, the silence would be waiting, reminding him of what was missing. Jamal's assistants would hint that it was time for him to find someone, to start a family, to share his life with a partner who could bring warmth back into the mansion that felt like a beautiful prison. His mother's words echoed in his mind every time he considered it, reminding him to be careful, to guard the parts of himself that could be wounded, to find someone who saw him, not the weight of his wallet. It was during these thoughts, these long, restless nights spent reading in his library or standing by the glass walls watching the rain slide down like tears, that he realized he did not want to grow old in silence. He wanted to hear laughter in his home, to have someone to share a morning coffee with, to have small feet running across marble floors, to have the warmth of a partner's hand in his, reminding him that he was not alone. He had everything. Businesses that thrived, employees who respected him, investments that grew daily, and a reputation for being not only wealthy but fair, a man of integrity in a world where many forgot what that meant. Yet the emptiness remained, a quiet companion in the corners of every room. Jamal did not want just anyone. He wanted someone who would see him for who he was, who would see the boy who had wiped windows at night, and the man who now signed million-dollar contracts, someone who would sit with him under the stars and talk about dreams, who would not be impressed by his cars but by his heart, who would not ask what he could buy her, but what he believed in. It was at a charity fashion gala, an event organized to raise funds for a local children's hospital, that Jamal first saw her. The room was alive with music and the clinking of glasses, models moving gracefully under soft lights, the air filled with perfume and polite laughter. Jamal stood near the edge of the room, watching as people moved, some glancing at him with admiration, others with curiosity, as if waiting for him to make a donation large enough to steal the evening. She was different. Her laughter, clear and warm, reached him across the room, and when she smiled, it was as if the lights dimmed around her. She wore a simple blue dress that hugged her figure without screaming for attention, her blonde hair falling around her shoulders in soft waves, her eyes bright as she spoke to the children who had been invited to the event. She knelt down to their level, fixing a small boy's bow tie, laughing as he made a face, and Jamal felt something stir in his chest that he had not felt in a long time. Her name was Lily, and when she stood up and their eyes met across the room, she gave him a smile that seemed genuine, without calculation, a smile that made him take a breath and straighten his tie before walking toward her. She was beautiful, yes, but it was the warmth in her smile, the ease with which she moved among people, the light in her eyes when she spoke to the children, that drew him in. They spoke for the first time near the refreshment table, her voice soft but confident, her laughter light, her presence like a breeze on a hot day. She told him about her work as a model, how she loved to volunteer, how she believed in using her platform to bring joy to children who needed hope. Jamal listened, watching the way her eyes shone as she spoke, the way she brushed her hair back when she laughed, the way she seemed to light up the space around her. In that moment, Jamal felt something in the mansion-sized emptiness of his life shift. For the first time in many years, he allowed himself to hope that perhaps, just perhaps, He could find someone to share the world he had built, someone to walk with him through the gardens, someone who would sit by the fireplace on rainy nights, someone who would see not just the billionaire, but the man who had once been a boy with dreams too big for his small apartment. As the gala ended and people began to leave, Jamal found himself walking Lily to her car, the conversation between them flowing easily, filled with laughter and soft pauses where their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. She thanked him for the conversation, for the laughter, for the way he listened. And as she drove away, Jamal stood under the soft glow of the streetlights, feeling a warmth in his chest that he carried with him as he drove back to his mansion. That night, as he stood on his balcony, looking out over the city lights, Jamal allowed himself to smile, a real, quiet smile that reached his eyes. For the first time, he felt that maybe, just maybe, he would not have to face the future alone. He did not know then how deeply Lily would entangle herself in his life, how quickly her presence would light up the dark corners of his home, how easily her laughter would fill the silence that had become his companion. He did not know how easily he would fall for her, how completely he would trust her, how much he would give her without question. And he did not know, standing there under the stars, that this warmth he felt was the beginning of a story that would test every promise he had made to himself, every lesson his mother had taught him, every dream he had carried from those dusty streets to the marble floors of his empire. But for now, as the breeze touched his face and the lights of the city glittered like the promise of tomorrow, Jamal allowed himself to believe that love, real love, was possible, and that he too deserved to find it. The next morning, Jamal awoke before the dawn, the pale blue of the sky creeping past the heavy curtains of his bedroom as he lay in bed, Lily's laughter echoing in his mind. It was strange how quickly a moment could become a memory, how the way she had smiled at him the night before, the way her eyes had softened when she spoke about children, the ease with which she made the world feel lighter, had followed him into his dreams and into his wakened thoughts. He rose, showered, and dressed in a quiet ritual of movements that had once felt empty, but now seemed to carry a promise he could not yet name. For the first time in a long time, he found himself humming softly as he buttoned his shirt, the reflection in the mirror showing a man who was still tired but no longer alone in his heart. The day was filled with meetings, investors who wanted updates on projections, a presentation to a new group of young entrepreneurs he was mentoring, a boardroom echoing with polite laughter as Jamal shared stories of his failures and how they had become the stepping stones to the empire he now controlled. But even as he stood there, confident and composed, his mind would drift back to Lily, her smile, the way she had tilted her head when she listened, the soft, musical way she said his name as if it mattered. He found himself glancing at his phone, wondering if it was too soon to send a message, to ask if she would like to meet again, to risk the vulnerability that came with letting someone into the fortress he had built around himself. When he finally sent the message, his fingers paused above the screen for a moment, his heart beating faster than it should have. Her reply came quickly, light and warm, and they agreed to meet for coffee that weekend at a small cafe she liked near the park, a place she said felt like a piece of quiet in a noisy world. Jamal arrived early, the soft scent of roasted coffee beans and warm pastries meeting him as he walked in, the small tables filled with people talking in low voices, the windows letting in the soft glow of the morning light. When Lily arrived, she wore a simple dress, her hair pulled back, a small smile lighting her face as she saw him waiting. She looked beautiful, but more than that, she looked comfortable, and Jamal felt the tension in his shoulders ease as she sat down across from him. They talked about everything and nothing, about childhood memories, about books they loved, about dreams they still carried in the quiet moments of their days. Lily spoke of wanting to open a small foundation for children, of teaching young girls that they were enough even if the world tried to tell them otherwise, of traveling to places where she could help build schools and safe homes for those who needed them most. Jamal listened, nodding, his heart swelling with each word, the image of her playing with the children at the gala blending seamlessly with the dreams she shared. She asked him about his work, about what drove him to keep going even when he had more than enough, and he found himself telling her stories he had not shared with anyone else, stories of the nights spent hungry and cold, of the promises he made to his mother, of the way he still felt like that boy in the window, looking up at the stars, wondering if he would ever be enough. They began to see each other more often. Quiet dinners at small restaurants where no one recognized them, walks through the park where Lily would stop to admire the flowers or point out a bird she found beautiful, evenings spent in Jamal's garden as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink while they talked about everything that mattered and the things that didn't. Lily laughed easily, her head thrown back, her eyes crinkling at the corners, and Jamal found himself falling in love with the way her laughter filled the spaces that had once been empty, the way her presence made his home feel less like a mansion and more like a place where life could truly exist. He took her to meet his mother's grave one quiet afternoon, the sun warm on their faces as they stood there, the wind whispering through the trees. He told Lily about the woman who had raised him, about her strength, about the way she had taught him to value people over things, to value truth over comfort. Lily had stood quietly, her hand slipping into his, her eyes soft as she listened, and when he finished, she pressed a soft kiss to his cheek and whispered that his mother would be proud of him. Jamal had closed his eyes, allowing himself to believe it, allowing himself to feel the comfort of her words, the way they wrapped around him like a promise. As the weeks turned into months, Jamal found himself bringing Lily deeper into his world. She met his closest friends, the small circle of people who had stood by him during the hardest moments, who had seen him at his worst and his best. They all loved her, charmed by her kindness, her humor, the way she made Jamal smile in a way they had not seen in years. She asked questions about the business, showing interest, wanting to understand what he did, and he found himself explaining contracts and investments, teaching her the language of the world he had built, feeling proud when she understood, when she offered small insights that made him pause and consider a new perspective. Lily seemed to fit seamlessly into his life, her presence like a light in the dark corners of his days, her laughter like music in the quiet halls of his home. She would walk barefoot through his garden, stopping to pick flowers, twirling with them in her hands as she laughed, telling him stories about her childhood, about dreams she had tucked away, about the way she had always felt like she was searching for something more. Jamal listened, watched, and loved her, feeling that perhaps, finally, he had found someone who saw him for who he was, someone who could share his world without taking it over, someone who would build a future with him, not for what he could give her, but for the life they could create together. But there were small moments that Jamal would notice, moments that flickered and passed before he could hold on to them, moments when Lily's eyes would shift when she looked at the expensive things in his home, moments when her smile seemed just a little too practiced when she was around certain people, Moments when she would linger a little too long in conversations about the life they could have, the places they could travel, the things they could buy. She would brush it off with a laugh, changing the subject, kissing him softly as if to distract him, and Jamal, lost in the warmth of her touch, would let it go, telling himself that it was nothing, that it was only his fear speaking, that Lily was different. As their relationship deepened, Lily began to speak of the future more often, of the home they would build together, of the family they would raise, of the life they would share. Jamal found himself wanting those things too, imagining a life with her, children running through the halls of his home, laughter filling the rooms, holidays spent together, quiet mornings over coffee, the simple, beautiful moments of a life shared with someone he loved. When she spoke of these things, her eyes would light up, her hands moving as she painted pictures of the life they could have, and Jamal would listen, smiling, allowing himself to believe in the future she described. Then came the day when he decided to propose. It was a quiet evening, the sky painted with the soft colors of the setting sun, the air warm and filled with the scent of roses from his garden. He had planned it carefully, wanting it to be perfect, wanting it to be a moment they would remember forever. A small table set under the canopy of the trees, lights strung above them, a soft melody playing in the background, the world fading away until it was just the two of them. Lily had arrived, her eyes widening in surprise, her smile lighting up the space as she took in the scene he had created. They had dinner, laughing, talking, sharing stories as the stars began to appear above them, and when the moment felt right, Jamal had stood, taken her hand, and dropped to one knee, holding out a ring that sparkled in the light. Lily had gasped, her hands flying to her mouth, tears filling her eyes as she nodded, saying yes over and over, her voice breaking with emotion as she pulled him up, wrapping her arms around him, kissing him with a joy that felt real, that felt like everything he had hoped for. She posted the moment on her social media, the video capturing the way she had cried, the way she had laughed, the way she had said yes, her friends flooding the comments with congratulations, calling her lucky, calling her blessed, telling her that she had won the heart of a good man, a wealthy man, a man who would give her everything. Jamal watched her as she read the comments, her eyes shining, her smile wide, and he felt a warmth in his chest, a quiet happiness that settled into his bones. They began to plan the wedding, Lily excited as she spoke of dresses, of venues, of flowers and music, and the day that would mark the beginning of their forever. Jamal let her take the lead, watching as she moved through the preparations with enthusiasm, wanting her to have the day she dreamed of, wanting her to feel loved, to feel celebrated. He saw the way she carefully chose the most beautiful dress, the way she spoke of wanting the world to see their love, of wanting their wedding to be a day that people would remember. He saw the joy in her eyes as she tried on veils, as she picked out flowers, as she spoke of the home they would share, of the life they would build, and he let her, wanting her to have every happiness she desired. But even as he watched her plan, even as he saw the excitement in her smile, the laughter in her voice, there was a small part of him, quiet and hidden, that felt a whisper of doubt, a whisper that reminded him of his mother's words, of the promise he had made to himself to never lose sight of the truth, to never forget who he was and what mattered most. Jamal silenced that whisper, telling himself that love required trust, that Lily loved him, that they were building something real together. He let himself believe that this was the life he was meant to have, that this was the love he had waited for, that this was the beginning of the family he had always dreamed of. As the wedding day approached, Jamal found himself standing in the rooms of his home, imagining Lily there, imagining the laughter of children, the warmth of a family, the simple beauty of a life shared with someone he loved. He allowed himself to dream, to hope, to believe that he had finally found what he had been searching for. He did not know that the whispers he silenced were the echoes of a truth he could not yet see, that beneath the laughter and the smiles, beneath the plans and the promises, there was a secret that would change everything, a secret that would test the strength of his heart and the depth of his faith in love. And so, as the final days before the wedding passed in a blur of preparations and celebrations, Jamal stood at the edge of a future he believed in, unaware that the woman he loved carried a deception that would break him, that would force him to remember the promises he made to himself on the dusty streets of his childhood, that would remind him of who he truly was when everything else was stripped away. The days leading up to the wedding moved like a soft river, pulling Jamal deeper into the current of hope and anticipation, as if the life he had dreamed of was finally ready to unfold before him. Each morning, he awoke with a quiet smile, the soft dawn light filtering through the curtains of his bedroom, the air heavy with the scent of roses blooming in the gardens below. He found himself humming as he moved through the halls of his mansion, the preparations for the wedding filling each room with a new kind of energy, with boxes of delicate flowers arriving at the front gates, deliveries of fine linen, and carefully crafted invitations stacked neatly on the tables, the soft rustle of staff moving through the house ensuring that everything would be perfect for the day Lily would walk down the aisle toward him. Lily was everywhere. Her presence had become a gentle warmth in the spaces that had once felt cold, her laughter echoing through the hallways as she moved from room to room, speaking with florists, dressmakers, and event planners with a graceful authority that made Jamal's heart swell with pride. She looked radiant in the soft morning light, her blonde hair pulled back as she pored over design boards and seating charts, her fingers tapping against the papers as she imagined the day when all their friends and family would witness the beginning of their forever. She would turn to him sometimes, her eyes bright with excitement, asking for his opinion on the arrangements, and he would smile, telling her that whatever made her happy was what he wanted, that her joy was all that mattered. They visited venues, walking hand in hand through grand halls lined with crystal chandeliers, stepping onto terraces overlooking the city that sprawled below them like a painting. Lily would point to the spaces where she imagined tables draped in white, where flowers would cascade in gentle arches, where music would drift through the air as she walked toward him, a vision in white. She would talk about the flowers she wanted, white roses and peonies, delicate arrangements that would frame the path she would walk, the musicians who would play soft melodies as guests arrived, the laughter and the soft murmurs of excitement as people found their seats, waiting for the moment when they would see her take her first step toward him. Jamal listened, nodding, his heart filled with a quiet happiness as he watched her, her dreams unfolding with each word she spoke, her hands moving through the air as if she could already see the day in her mind, feel the warmth of the sunlight on her skin, hear the soft gasp of the guests as she appeared in her gown. He found himself wanting to give her everything, to create a day so beautiful that it would remain etched in her memory forever. A day that would remind her always of how deeply he loved her. They spent evenings together in the garden, the soft glow of lanterns illuminating the space around them as they talked about the future, about the home they would build, about the children they would have. Lily would lean against him, her head resting on his shoulder, her voice soft as she spoke of laughter in the halls, of birthdays and holidays spent together, of quiet mornings in the kitchen with the smell of coffee and the sound of small feet running across the marble floors. Jamal would close his eyes, letting himself see it, letting himself believe that the emptiness that had once filled these halls would be replaced with life, with warmth, with the kind of love that made a house a home. Lily's friends would visit often, bright young women with loud laughter and excited voices, helping her choose dresses, tasting cakes, and debating colors for the flowers and decorations. Jamal would watch them from a distance, the way they giggled together, the way they whispered with wide eyes, the way Lily's smile would widen when they praised her choices, telling her how lucky she was, how perfect her life was going to be. They would glance at him sometimes, their smiles polite but their eyes curious, taking in the man who was about to become Lily's husband, the man who had built an empire with his bare hands, who had given Lily a ring that sparkled like a promise under the light. Sometimes Jamal would catch fragments of their conversations as he passed by, words like luxury, mansion, future, slipping through the laughter like small pebbles dropping into a still pond, creating ripples that reached him even as he tried to brush them away. Lily would laugh, brushing her hair back, telling them stories about the plans they had, about the life they would live, about the travels they would take, and Jamal would pause, watching her, a small flicker of something he could not name moving through him before he would turn away, telling himself it was nothing, that it was normal for people to dream, to imagine a beautiful life together. Lily often spoke about the wedding being a day for the world to see their love, how she wanted it to be the most beautiful wedding anyone had ever seen, a day that would be remembered and talked about, a day that would show everyone how much they loved each other. She would look at him with those bright eyes, her hands clasped together, telling him how important it was to her, how she wanted every detail to be perfect, how it was the day she had dreamed of since she was a child. Jamal would nod, smiling, telling her that whatever she wanted, he would make it happen, that he wanted her to have the day she deserved. The expenses grew, each new addition to the wedding adding another layer of beauty, another detail that Lily said would make the day unforgettable. She chose a dress that shimmered under the lights of the boutique, the fabric falling around her like a waterfall of silk, her eyes bright with tears as she turned to see herself in the mirror. She spoke of the shoes, the jewelry, the small touches that would complete her look, her friends nodding in agreement, telling her that she would look like a queen, that Jamal would not be able to take his eyes off her. Jamal watched, his heart tightening with a strange mix of joy and a whisper of something he could not yet understand, watching the way Lily's eyes lingered on the price tags before she would turn to him with that smile, telling him it was the one she wanted. The guest list grew as well, each new name added with the promise that they were important, that they would be there to witness their love, that it was only right to include them in the celebration. The caterers were booked, the musicians rehearsed, the photographers prepared for the day that was to come, and Jamal found himself moving through each decision with a quiet acceptance, wanting to give Lily the day she wanted, wanting to see her smile, to hear her laughter, to feel the warmth of her happiness filling the spaces that had once been silent. There were moments, quiet and fleeting, when Jamal would see something in Lily's eyes when she looked at the mansion, at the cars parked in the driveway, at the life he had built from nothing. A flash of calculation, a moment of hunger, gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by her bright smile and the warmth of her laughter. She would take his hand, pulling him back into the moment, telling him about the flowers, about the music, about the dress, and Jamal would let it go, telling himself that it was nothing, that it was only his fear whispering to him in the dark corners of his mind. He wanted to believe in her, in them, in the future they were building together. He wanted to believe that Lily loved him for who he was, not for what he could give her, that her dreams of their life together were built on the foundation of the love they shared, not on the weight of his wealth. He silenced the small doubts, burying them beneath the laughter they shared, beneath the soft moments when she would look at him and tell him how much she loved him, how excited she was to become his wife, how she could not wait to build a life with him. Jamal found himself preparing a gift for Lily, something that would be a symbol of his love, of his commitment, of the future he wanted to share with her. A house by the ocean, a place where they could escape the noise of the city, where they could build new memories, where they could raise their children and watch the sunsets together, their hands intertwined as the waves crashed against the shore. He imagined her smile when she would see it, the way her eyes would light up, the way she would throw her arms around him, telling him that it was perfect, that it was everything she had ever wanted. He planned to give it to her on the night before their wedding, a final gift before they stepped into their new life together, a promise of the life he wanted to build with her, a life filled with love, with laughter, with the simple moments that made everything else worthwhile. He imagined the look on her face, the way she would kiss him, the way she would tell him that she loved him, that she was ready to spend the rest of her life with him. As the final days before the wedding approached, the mansion was alive with preparations, with staff moving quietly through the halls, with deliveries arriving at the gates, with the soft hum of excitement in the air. Lily moved through it all like a queen, her smile bright, her laughter filling the rooms, her eyes shining with anticipation as she spoke of the day that was to come. Jamal watched her, his heart full, his mind quieting the small whispers of doubt, letting himself believe in the love they had, in the life they would build, in the future that was waiting for them just beyond the horizon. He did not know, as he stood at the window of his study, watching the sun set over the city, that the cracks in the mask were there, waiting, small fractures hidden beneath the surface of the smiles and laughter, fractures that would soon become impossible to ignore. He did not know that the whispers he silenced were the echoes of truths he would soon be forced to see, that the love he believed in would be tested in a way he could never have imagined. For now, as the sky darkened and the lights of the city began to twinkle like stars, Jamal allowed himself to believe, to hope, to dream of the life that was waiting for him, unaware that the night before the wedding would bring with it a revelation that would change everything, tearing apart the future he had so carefully built, leaving him standing at the edge of a choice that would define the rest of his life. The night before the wedding came quietly, the air in the mansion still and heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for the dawn that would bring with it the promise of a new life. Jamal stood at the window of his study, looking out over the city that glittered beneath him like a sea of stars, the soft hum of traffic a distant murmur that barely reached him. The gardens below were dark, the roses and lavender swaying gently in the breeze, and for a moment Jamal closed his eyes, imagining Lily walking among them, her laughter ringing out like a melody, her hair catching the light of the lanterns he had hung for her. He felt a quiet excitement building in his chest, a warmth that spread through him as he thought of the day to come, the moment he would see her walking down the aisle toward him, the smile on her face, the tears in her eyes as she said the words that would bind them together forever. He thought of the home they would build, of the children they would raise, of the life they would share, and he felt a peace that he had not known in many years, a soft hope that settled into his bones and made the world feel lighter. The house was quiet, the staff having finished their preparations for the day, the soft glow of the lamps casting gentle shadows against the walls. Jamal moved through the halls, his footsteps silent on the polished floors, pausing occasionally to look at the details that had been arranged for the wedding, the flowers that had been delivered, the small boxes of favors prepared for the guests, the lists and charts that Lily had so carefully planned. He could see her touch in everything, the way she had chosen each detail with care, her excitement and joy reflected in the colors and the arrangements, and he smiled, feeling a deep gratitude for the woman who had brought light into his life. In his bedroom, the box containing the keys to the beach house sat on the table, wrapped in soft white paper, a ribbon tied around it with a small note that simply read, "For us, for always." He planned to give it to her that evening, a final gift before they stepped into their new life together, a promise of the future he wanted to share with her, a place where they could escape the noise of the world, where they could build their dreams and create new memories, just the two of them. He imagined the look on her face, the way her eyes would light up, the way she would kiss him and tell him that she loved him, that she was ready for the life they had planned together. He picked up the box, holding it in his hands for a moment, feeling the weight of it, the significance of what it represented, and then he slipped it into the pocket of his jacket, deciding to take it to her at the hotel where she was staying with her bridesmaids. It felt right. The idea of surprising her, of seeing the joy on her face, of sharing a quiet moment together before the day that would change their lives forever. He checked the time, noting that it was late but deciding that it did not matter, that this was a moment worth having, that this was a memory they would both cherish. As he drove through the quiet streets, the city lights blurring past him, he felt a calm settle over him, a certainty that everything was as it should be, that the path he had chosen was the right one, that the woman he loved was waiting for him, dreaming of the life they would begin together in just a few hours. He thought of the way she had looked at him during their last dinner together, her eyes soft and filled with love, the way she had spoken of their future, of the family they would build, of the laughter and the love that would fill their home. He held on to that image, letting it guide him through the night, letting it fill him with a quiet happiness that made the world feel softer. The hotel was grand, its entrance lit with soft golden lights, the marble floors gleaming under the glow of the chandeliers as he walked through the lobby, the box in his pocket pressing gently against his side as a reminder of the moment he was about to create. The elevator ride was silent, the soft hum of the machinery the only sound as he watched the numbers change, floor after floor, bringing him closer to her. He imagined her in her room, perhaps sitting with her friends, laughing softly, her hair falling around her shoulders, her eyes bright with the excitement of the day to come. He imagined her turning toward him as he knocked, her smile spreading across her face as she saw him standing there, her arms reaching for him as she welcomed him into her space, into the quiet of the night before their forever. As he stepped out of the elevator, the hallway was quiet, the soft carpet muffling his footsteps as he walked toward her room. He paused for a moment outside the door, taking a breath, steadying himself, letting the moment settle around him before he lifted his hand to knock. But before his knuckles could touch the wood, he heard her voice, soft and low, drifting through the slight crack in the door where it had not closed properly. At first, he smiled, recognizing the warmth in her tone, the familiarity of it, the way it always made him feel at home. But then he heard another voice, a man's voice, low and quiet, and the smile froze on his face as he listened, as the words that followed shattered the world he had so carefully built around them. "I can't wait to leave after the wedding." Lily's voice, soft and tinged with laughter, reached him clearly, the words like ice against his skin. "It's all set. Once we get through tomorrow, once the papers are signed and the photos are taken, I'll get what I need, and then we can leave. We'll go to Hawaii like we planned, and we'll have everything we've ever wanted." The man laughed softly, and Jamal felt his breath catch, the air in the hallway suddenly thick and heavy as the reality of the words settled around him. Lily's voice came again, light and easy, the same voice that had told him she loved him, that had promised him forever. "He's so easy to fool, so desperate to believe in love, in a future with me. I almost feel sorry for him. But this is our chance, and I'm not letting it slip away." The box in Jamal's pocket felt heavy, pressing against him like a weight he could no longer bear, the promise it held turning to ash in his mind as he stood there, frozen, the world around him narrowing to the sound of her laughter, the softness of her betrayal sinking into his bones. He could see her in his mind, the way she had smiled at him, the way she had held his hand, the way she had spoken of their future, and each memory twisted inside him, each moment they had shared turning into a blade that cut deeper with every breath he took. He stepped back, the hallway spinning around him as he struggled to breathe, the reality of the moment crushing him as he turned away from the door, the laughter still ringing in his ears. He moved down the hallway, his footsteps heavy, his heart pounding in his chest, each beat a reminder of the truth he could no longer ignore. The elevator ride down was a blur, the soft glow of the lights overhead harsh against the darkness that had settled inside him, the reflection in the mirrored walls showing a man who had just lost everything he thought he had found. Outside, the night was cold, the air biting against his skin as he walked to his car, the city lights harsh and bright, the world moving around him as if nothing had changed while everything inside him was falling apart. He sat in the driver's seat, the box still in his pocket, the ribbon pressing against his side as a cruel reminder of the future that would never be. And he lowered his head against the steering wheel, the weight of the moment pressing down on him until the tears came, silent and hot, slipping down his cheeks as he let the truth break him in the quiet of the night. He did not know how long he sat there, the cold creeping into the car, the city moving around him as he remained still, lost in the storm of his thoughts and the pain that settled into his chest like a stone. The dreams he had built, the future he had imagined, the love he had believed in, all of it lay in ruins around him, shattered by the words he had heard, by the laughter that still echoed in his mind. He thought of his mother, of the promises he had made to himself, of the lessons she had taught him, and he felt the weight of his own failure, the way he had allowed himself to believe, to trust, to hope, only to be betrayed by the one person he had let into the quiet places of his heart. When he finally lifted his head, the tears drying on his cheeks, the world outside was the same, the city lights still glowing, the streets still alive with the soft hum of life. But everything inside him had changed. The man who had driven to the hotel with a heart full of hope and love was gone, replaced by the man who now understood the truth, who now saw the reality of the woman he had loved, who now knew that the life he had imagined was nothing more than a lie. He started the car, the engine rumbling softly, and drove through the city, the lights blurring past him, the quiet of the night wrapping around him like a shroud as he returned to the mansion that now felt empty once more. The box remained in his pocket, unopened, the promise it held unfulfilled, the future it represented slipping away with each mile he drove. When he reached the gates of his home, the security guards nodded, unaware of the storm that raged inside him, unaware of the man who had returned broken and hollow, a man who now had to face the truth he could no longer ignore. Inside, the house was silent, the preparations for the wedding standing as a cruel reminder of the day that would no longer come, the flowers and decorations mocking him with their beauty, the arrangements Lily had chosen now tainted by the betrayal that had been hidden behind her smile. Jamal stood in the center of the hall, looking around at the world he had built for her, the world he had opened to her, and felt the emptiness return, the silence pressing against him until it was all he could hear. He pulled the box from his pocket, looking at it for a long moment before he set it down on the table, the ribbon still tied neatly around it, the note still attached. For us, for always, the words now a lie that cut deeper than any truth ever could. He turned away, moving through the halls of his home, the weight of the moment pressing down on him with each step, the dreams he had once held slipping through his fingers like sand, leaving behind only the cold, hard reality of what had been hidden beneath the surface of her smiles and laughter. That night, as he lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, the darkness pressing down around him, Jamal let the tears fall, silent and unrelenting, the pain of betrayal sinking into him with each breath he took. He thought of Lily, of the life they had planned, of the family he had dreamed of, and felt the sharp ache of loss settle into his bones, a reminder of the price of trust, of love, of believing in something that was never real. And as the night stretched on, as the darkness gave way to the first pale light of dawn, Jamal made a promise to himself, a promise that would guide him through the storm that was to come, a promise that would shape the choices he would make, the path he would walk. He promised himself that he would not let this betrayal destroy him, that he would rise from the ashes of the life he had lost, that he would find a way to move forward, stronger and wiser, carrying with him the lessons he had learned, the truth he had discovered. But for now, as the sun began to rise, painting the sky with the soft colors of a new day, Jamal allowed himself to feel the pain, to let it wash over him, to let it remind him of what mattered, of who he was, of the strength that still lay within him, waiting to guide him toward the future that was still his to claim. Morning came not with the promise of a new beginning, but with a quiet heaviness that settled into every room of the mansion, the soft light of dawn casting long shadows across the polished floors and the carefully placed arrangements that Lily had so meticulously chosen. Jamal stood in his bedroom, staring at his reflection in the mirror, the face looking back at him that of a man who had spent the night with the taste of betrayal sharp on his tongue, the weight of a broken promise pressing against his shoulders. The suit he wore was tailored to perfection, the fabric smooth and dark against his skin, the tie a precise knot at his throat, every detail in place as it should have been for the day he was meant to marry the woman he loved. But the man inside the suit felt like a stranger, a man who had died quietly in the darkness of the night before, leaving behind someone who now stood in silence, planning what needed to be done. He moved through the house slowly, the staff greeting him with polite smiles, their eyes bright with the excitement of the day, unaware of the storm that was brewing quietly beneath the surface. They moved around him, adjusting the flowers, checking the lighting, preparing the final details for the guests who would soon arrive to witness what they believed would be a celebration of love, a joining of two souls destined to build a life together. Jamal's eyes followed them, noting the careful placement of each rose, the soft rustle of fabric as they adjusted the tablecloths, the quiet murmur of voices discussing the schedule for the day. It all felt like a performance now, a carefully constructed illusion meant to convince the world of a lie that had already been exposed in the darkness of a hotel hallway. The box, with the keys to the beach house, still sat on the table in his study, the ribbon now slightly wrinkled, the note still attached, a cruel reminder of the promise he had once believed in. Jamal glanced at it as he passed, allowing himself a single breath to feel the sharpness of the betrayal before turning away, focusing instead on the plan he had begun to form in the quiet hours of the morning. A plan that would ensure that the truth would be seen, that the world would know who Lily truly was, that he would reclaim his dignity in the face of the lie that had been so carefully crafted around him. He had spoken briefly with his assistant, a trusted man who had been with him since the early days of his company, explaining what he needed, what had to be prepared, the recordings that needed to be played, the arrangements that needed to be made to ensure that when the time came, there would be no doubt, no denial, no escape from the truth. His assistant had looked at him with wide eyes, the shock evident, but had nodded, agreeing to handle the details with the quiet efficiency that Jamal had always admired. It was not anger that guided Jamal's actions now, but a cold clarity, a resolve that had settled into him like steel, ensuring that he would not allow himself to be made a fool in front of the world, that he would stand in the moment of betrayal with dignity, with strength, with the quiet power of a man who knew who he was, even when everything else was stripped away. As the morning moved into afternoon, the mansion became a hive of activity, the arriving guests filling the air with laughter and conversation, their footsteps echoing through the halls as they admired the beauty of the arrangements, the luxury of the space, the careful details that Lily had chosen to create what she had called the wedding of the year. They greeted Jamal with warm smiles and firm handshakes, offering congratulations, telling him how lucky he was, how beautiful the day was, how perfect everything seemed. He smiled back, his responses calm and measured, the warmth in his eyes hiding the storm that raged quietly within him, the knowledge that the perfection they admired was nothing more than a fragile mask that would soon be torn away. The wedding venue had been transformed into a vision of elegance, the white and gold ribbons lining the chairs, the flowers carefully arranged in tall glass vases that caught the light, the soft music playing as the guests found their seats, their conversations filled with anticipation for the moment they believed would be the beginning of a beautiful love story. Jamal moved among them, shaking hands, accepting well wishes, his eyes scanning the room, noting the placement of the screens, the quiet nod from his assistant confirming that everything was ready, that when the time came, the truth would be revealed for all to see. Outside, the driveway was filled with cars, the soft crunch of gravel under tires as more guests arrived, stepping out in carefully chosen attire, their laughter and voices carrying through the warm afternoon air. The photographers moved among them, capturing moments of smiles and embraces, the details of the day that would be shared across social media, that would tell the world of the beauty and elegance of the wedding of Jamal and Lily, of the love that was supposed to be celebrated. Jamal stood by the entrance, greeting them as they arrived, his smile steady, his voice calm, his eyes hiding the storm that was waiting for the precise moment to break. Inside the bridal suite, Lily was surrounded by her friends, their laughter bright, their voices excited as they helped her into her dress, the fabric shimmering around her like a promise, the veil carefully placed, the final touches of makeup applied as she smiled at her reflection, her eyes bright with the anticipation of the day. She moved among them with the grace of a queen, accepting their compliments, laughing softly as they told her how beautiful she looked, how lucky she was, how perfect everything was. She checked her phone frequently, posting small glimpses of the preparations, her smile bright in every photo, the captions filled with words of excitement and love, the comments from friends and followers flooding in, telling her how beautiful she was, how blessed she was to have found a man like Jamal. She did not know that Jamal had heard her laughter in the darkness of the hallway, that he had heard the truth in her own words, that the promise she had made to another man had shattered the promise she had made to him. She did not know that as she prepared to walk down the aisle, the illusion she had so carefully crafted was moments away from crumbling, that the world she had planned to build on a foundation of lies was about to collapse around her, leaving her exposed, leaving her with nothing. As the time for the ceremony approached, the guests took their seats, the soft music filling the air as the photographers positioned themselves, the quiet murmur of anticipation moving through the crowd as they turned their eyes toward the aisle, waiting for the moment when the bride would appear, when the ceremony would begin. Jamal stood at the front, his hands clasped in front of him, his eyes steady as he looked out over the sea of faces, each one turned toward him with smiles, with excitement, with the belief that they were about to witness a moment of love, of unity, of a promise made before the world. The music shifted, the soft notes rising as the doors opened, and Lily appeared, her smile radiant, her eyes bright as she stepped forward, the dress shimmering around her, the veil trailing behind her as she walked slowly down the aisle, each step measured, each movement graceful, the embodiment of the dream she had created for the world to see. The guests turned, their eyes following her, their smiles warm, their whispers filled with admiration, their phones raised to capture the moment, to freeze the image of the beautiful bride walking toward the man she was meant to spend her life with. Jamal watched her as she moved, his eyes steady, his face calm, his mind quiet as he allowed himself to see her, not as the woman he had loved, but as the woman who had betrayed him, as the woman who had planned to take his trust and turn it into a weapon, as the woman who had laughed in the darkness with another man, planning the moment when she would leave him, taking with her the future he had once believed in. He allowed himself to feel the final ache of that betrayal as she reached the front, as she stood beside him, her smile bright, her eyes shining with what she wanted the world to see as love. The officiant began to speak, his voice calm, his words carefully chosen as he spoke of love, of unity, of the joining of two souls in the promise of forever. The guests listened, their eyes on the couple before them, the moment building, the anticipation rising as the ceremony moved closer to the moment when the vows would be exchanged, when the promises would be spoken, when the illusion would become, for them, a reality. But as the officiant paused, as he asked if there was anyone who had a reason why the two should not be joined, Jamal lifted his hand, his movement calm, precise, his eyes steady as the room fell into a heavy silence. The screens that had been placed around the venue flickered to life, the soft glow of the images catching the attention of every guest, their heads turning, their eyes narrowing in confusion as the audio began to play, the voices clear, undeniable, the laughter sharp as Lily's words filled the space, her voice speaking of plans to leave, of the money she would take, of the life she would build with another man, her laughter ringing out like a knife in the quiet of the moment. Gasps filled the air, the guests turning back to Lily, who stood frozen, her eyes wide, her face pale beneath the makeup, the bouquet trembling in her hands as the truth she had hidden was laid bare before the world. The illusion she had created shattering around her with each word that played, with each moment of her betrayal exposed for all to see. She turned to Jamal, her lips moving, but no sound came, her eyes pleading, her hands reaching out as if to grasp the moment, to pull it back, to deny what had been made undeniable. Jamal looked at her, his eyes steady, his voice calm as he spoke. The words cutting through the silence like a blade, telling her that there would be no wedding, that there would be no future built on lies, that the promise she had broken could never be restored, that the truth would stand in the place of the illusion she had tried to create. He turned away from her, his steps measured, his head held high as he walked down the aisle, the silence breaking around him as whispers rose as the guests turned to look at Lily, her tears falling, her hands shaking, her body swaying as the weight of the moment crushed her, as the reality of her actions became a cage she could no longer escape. The photographers captured the moment, the image of the bride standing alone, the groom walking away, the guests turning, the whispers rising, the moment becoming the story that would spread across the city. That would be shared. It would become the truth that Lily could never escape, the truth that Jamal had reclaimed, the dignity he had restored, the quiet revenge that would echo long after the flowers had wilted, long after the music had faded, long after the day that was meant to be a celebration had become the day that exposed the lie. As Jamal stepped outside, the air cool against his skin, the sky above clear and bright, he felt the weight of the moment settle into him, the pain of betrayal still sharp, but the dignity of truth stronger, the quiet power of standing for himself, of refusing to be broken by the lies of another, giving him a strength that would guide him through the days to come. The man who walked away from the wedding that day was not the man who had once believed in the promise of forever with Lily, but a man who now understood the cost of trust, the price of love, the quiet power of reclaiming one's truth in the face of betrayal. And as he stepped into the waiting car, the world moving around him, the whispers rising, the story spreading, Jamal closed his eyes, allowing himself a single breath to feel the pain, to acknowledge the loss before opening them again, looking out at the road ahead, knowing that the future was still his to claim, that the life he would build would be his alone, built on truth, on strength, on the quiet promise he made to himself as the car pulled away, leaving behind the ruins of a wedding that would never be, and the whispers of a truth that would forever remain. The mansion stood silent in the days that followed, a grand structure filled with the ghosts of plans that would never come to pass. The flowers Lily had chosen wilting quietly in their vases, the scent of roses and lavender now heavy in the stale air of empty halls. The staff moved carefully through the rooms, their voices hushed, their eyes dropping when they passed Jamal, as if the weight of the truth that had been laid bare still clung to the walls, demanding silence out of respect for the man who now walked among them with quiet, heavy steps. Outside, the gardens remained immaculate. The fountains still ran. The world continued its rhythm. But within the walls of the mansion, the echo of betrayal hummed like a low, constant reminder. Jamal spent his mornings in the library, the heavy curtains pulled back to allow the light to pour in, illuminating the titles of books he had once found comfort in, the worn edges of pages that had held the wisdom of those who had lived and suffered before him. He would sit by the window, the city stretching out before him, his reflection in the glass a reminder of the man he had become, the man who had stood with dignity while the illusion of his future shattered around him. There was no anger in him now, no bitterness that twisted his thoughts, but a quiet, cold understanding that everything he had built with Lily had been a lie, that the laughter and the promises had been the tools of deception, that the warmth he had allowed himself to believe in was nothing more than a mask she had worn until the truth was ready to surface. The media had devoured the story. The video of Lily's exposed betrayal spreading across social platforms with relentless speed. The image of her standing alone in her wedding gown, tears streaking down her face, the bouquet slipping from her trembling hands, becoming the symbol of a scandal that the city could not look away from. News outlets ran the story with headlines that twisted the knife further, calling her the gold digger bride, the queen of betrayal, the woman who lost everything. Photos of Jamal walking away from the altar, his head held high, his steps measured, became the image of quiet strength, of dignity reclaimed, of a man who refused to allow himself to be humiliated by a woman who had seen him only as a means to an end. Lily disappeared in the days that followed. The suite she had occupied at the hotel left in disarray. The dresses she had once admired thrown aside, the remnants of a life she had planned now nothing more than scattered fabric and smudged makeup on mirrors. Her social media accounts, once filled with carefully curated images of happiness and beauty, fell silent. The comment sections flooded with harsh words, with disbelief, with condemnation from those who had once praised her for her beauty, for her charm, for the life they had believed she was building with Jamal. Her friends, those who had once surrounded her with laughter and praise, distanced themselves, their silence louder than any words, their absence a punishment she could not escape. In quiet moments, Jamal would think of her, the way she had looked at him with eyes that had seemed so full of love, the way she had spoken of their future, of children and laughter and the warmth of a family built together. He would remember the softness of her touch, the sound of her laughter echoing through the halls, the way she had moved through his world as if she belonged there, and he would feel the sharp ache of the loss, the heaviness of what could have been, before letting the memory pass, allowing it to drift away like smoke in the cold morning air. He did not allow himself to dwell on it, to drown in the pain of what she had done, but instead he carried it with him as a reminder, a lesson etched into the quiet strength he now wore like armor. The staff who had once adored Lily, who had prepared meals to her liking, who had adjusted the flowers and the lighting to suit her tastes, now moved quietly, avoiding the subject, offering Jamal small gestures of kindness, a warm cup of tea left on his desk, a quiet nod of understanding as they passed him in the halls. His assistant, the man who had helped him expose the truth, remained by his side, handling the details of the aftermath with silent efficiency, ensuring that the world understood Jamal's side of the story, that the narrative remained clear, that the dignity Jamal had reclaimed remained untarnished in the public eye. At night, the mansion would grow cold, the silence settling in like a second skin, wrapping around Jamal as he moved through the rooms, the soft click of his footsteps the only sound. He would stand on the balcony, the city lights flickering in the distance, the breeze cool against his skin, and he would let the quiet surround him, allowing himself to feel the weight of the loneliness that returned now that Lily was gone, now that the promise of a future had been stripped away, leaving behind the emptiness that had once been filled with her laughter and the hope he had allowed himself to believe in. It was during one of these nights, as he stood looking out over the city, the cool air sharp with the scent of rain, that he felt the heaviness shift within him, the loneliness transforming from a weight that held him down to a reminder that he was still alive, that he had survived, that he had the power to choose what came next. He realized that the mansion, for all its beauty and luxury, had become a cage. A place where the echoes of what had been planned and lost would continue to haunt him if he remained. A place where every corner held a memory of Lily's laughter, of the way she had looked at him, of the promises she had made, each one now tainted by the truth of her betrayal. He thought of his mother, of the lessons she had taught him, of the strength she had carried within her even in the hardest moments, and he knew that staying in this place, allowing the ghosts of the past to define his future, would be a betrayal of everything she had taught him, of the promises he had made to himself as a boy standing in the dust of the streets, dreaming of a life built on truth and dignity. The mansion, the city, the empire he had built, all of it had become a reminder of what he had lost, and he knew that if he was to find peace, if he was to heal the wound that Lily's betrayal had left within him, he would have to leave it behind, to step away from the world he had created, to find himself again in the quiet, away from the whispers, away from the memories, away from the expectations of those who watched him, waiting to see what he would do next. The decision settled into him with a calm certainty, a quiet resolve that grew stronger each day as he moved through the mansion, as he handled the final details of the businesses that required his attention, as he spoke with his assistant, making arrangements for the leadership of the company, ensuring that the employees who depended on him would continue to be supported, that the vision he had created would continue to thrive even in his absence. He spoke with his legal team, ensuring that every detail was managed, that the responsibilities he carried would be transferred smoothly, that the transition would be seamless, leaving no loose ends to pull him back when he finally stepped away. In the final days before his departure, he walked through the mansion, room by room, allowing himself to see it one last time, to acknowledge the beauty of what he had built, to say goodbye to the place that had once held his dreams, that had once been the promise of a future filled with love and laughter. He paused in the library, his fingers brushing against the spines of the books he had once read late into the night, seeking wisdom, seeking comfort, seeking a path forward. He stood in the garden, the roses blooming quietly, the scent filling the air as he closed his eyes, remembering the nights he had spent there with Lily, her laughter soft in the darkness, the promises she had made, the dreams they had shared, each memory now nothing more than a reminder of what he had lost, of what he had survived. His assistant stood with him on the final day, the car waiting at the front of the mansion, the bags packed, the details managed, the world ready to continue without him for a while. The staff gathered quietly, their eyes filled with respect, their voices soft as they offered him their gratitude, their well wishes, their quiet understanding that he was stepping away not out of weakness but out of strength, reclaiming the life that had once been his, seeking the peace that he now knew he deserved. Jamal looked back at the mansion one last time, the grand structure standing tall and silent, the gardens blooming, the fountain running, the world continuing its rhythm even as he turned away, the decision made, the path clear. He stepped into the car, the door closing softly behind him, the engine humming to life as the driver pulled away, the mansion growing smaller in the distance, the city lights fading as they drove away, leaving behind the place that had once been his kingdom, the place that had once been filled with hope and promise, now nothing more than a chapter closed. As the car moved through the quiet streets, the early morning light painting the sky in soft hues of pink and gold, Jamal felt the heaviness lift, the quiet resolve within him growing stronger, the knowledge that he was not running away, but stepping toward something new, something that would allow him to heal, to find himself again, to reclaim the parts of him that had been lost in the noise and the betrayal and the silence of the mansion that had become a prison. The road ahead was unknown, but it was his, and as he looked out at the horizon, the soft light of dawn warming his skin, he allowed himself to believe that there was still a future waiting for him, a future built on truth, on strength, on the quiet promise he had made to himself as a boy, as a man, as a survivor. And so, Jamal left the city behind, the mansion behind, the whispers and the memories behind, stepping into the quiet of a new beginning, carrying with him the lessons he had learned, the strength he had reclaimed, the dignity he had restored, ready to find peace, ready to heal, ready to discover who he was when everything else was stripped away, ready to live. The road out of the city was quiet, the early dawn mist drifting across the hills as the car carried Jamal farther from the life he had known, each mile a soft, silent severing of the weight he had carried in the halls of the mansion, in the sharp glances of the city, in the whispers that had followed him even in the solitude of his room. He did not look back as the skyline faded behind him, the towering buildings dissolving into the haze of distance, replaced by the rolling green of quiet fields and the winding roads that cut through small towns, still waking beneath the pale dawn light. For the first time in weeks, his breath felt clean in his lungs, unburdened by the scent of lilies and roses that had become reminders of a promise broken, replaced now by the scent of earth and morning air, the soft rustle of leaves in the wind his only companion. Days passed in a gentle rhythm that felt unfamiliar, unhurried, the hours marked not by meetings or calls, but by the shifting of the light across the sky, the movement of shadows as the sun climbed and fell, the soft hum of insects in the warm afternoons. Jamal found himself in a small riverside town, the streets narrow and lined with aged brick buildings, their windows bright with flowers and boxes, the doors painted in cheerful colors that seemed to welcome him in their simplicity. He rented a small house on the edge of the river, its white walls and blue shutters a stark contrast to the vastness of the mansion he had left behind. The rooms quiet and filled with the soft light that filtered through the curtains, carrying with it the scent of the water and the whisper of the wind. Each morning he would walk to the edge of the river, the mist rising in soft curls from the surface as the fishermen prepared their boats, the quiet conversations carrying across the water as they worked, their hands skilled and steady, their laughter low and easy. Jamal would nod to them as he passed, his steps slow, his eyes tracing the ripples in the water, allowing himself to feel the quiet that settled into him, the slow unclenching of the tension that had wrapped itself around his chest like a vice for so long. He began to eat simple meals, fresh bread from the bakery in town, vegetables from the market where the vendors greeted him with warm smiles, their faces lined with the honesty of people who lived without pretense, their voices warm as they asked about his day, offered him the freshest of their produce, treating him as one of their own without knowing who he was or what he had left behind. In the evenings, Jamal would sit on the small wooden bench by the river, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink as the sun set, the water reflecting the colors and soft waves that moved with the current, carrying away the fragments of thoughts that would sometimes rise within him, the memories of laughter and betrayal, the echo of Lily's voice now growing fainter with each passing day. He would close his eyes, letting the breeze brush against his skin, the soft scent of water lilies drifting from the banks, and he would feel the quiet return, the slow healing of a wound that had once felt too deep to close. It was during one of these quiet evenings that he first saw her, a young woman standing at the edge of the river, her dress simple and worn, her hair tied back loosely, a few strands catching the light of the setting sun, turning them into threads of gold against the softness of the dusk. She was helping a small boy lift a fishing net from the water, her laughter carrying across the breeze, clear and bright, unburdened by the heaviness that Jamal had grown so accustomed to hearing in voices around him. Her eyes, when she looked up and caught his, were warm and open, the kind of eyes that spoke of kindness and strength, of a life lived honestly, of burdens carried with quiet grace. Her name was Elena, and she worked at the local orphanage, caring for children who had no one else, spending her days teaching them to read, to plant flowers in the small garden behind the building, to believe in the small joys that each day could bring even when life offered so little. Jamal would see her each morning, her hands carrying baskets of bread or fruit to the children, her laughter bright as she listened to their stories, her patience endless as she tied the laces of worn shoes, wiped tears from small faces, offered the comfort of her presence without asking for anything in return. She was not a woman who wore fine clothes or diamonds, who spoke of luxury or the desires of a grand life, but a woman who moved through the world with a quiet dignity, whose beauty was found in the way she smiled, in the way she listened, in the way she held the small hand of a frightened child, grounding them with her strength. Jamal began to help at the orphanage, at first quietly, bringing bags of rice and flour, fresh vegetables from the market, books for the children to read at night. He would watch as Elena thanked him, her eyes bright, her gratitude genuine, her focus always returning to the children who gathered around her, eager for her attention, her stories, her songs that she would sing softly as she washed their faces, braided their hair, mended the tears in their clothes. She would sit with Jamal in the evenings, the children playing nearby, their laughter ringing through the air as the sun set, and they would talk of simple things, of the weather, of the flowers that were beginning to bloom along the river, of the dreams the children spoke of in quiet voices as they drifted to sleep on the worn mattresses in the small rooms of the orphanage. In those conversations, Jamal found a peace he had never known, a warmth that settled into him as he listened to Elena speak of the small victories of each day, the moments of joy found in the laughter of a child who had learned a new word, in the quiet pride of a boy who had managed to tie his own shoes for the first time, in the soft smile of a girl who had once been too afraid to look others in the eye. He would watch her as she spoke, the way her eyes would light up, the way her hands would move as she described the stories the children told her, and he would feel the coldness that had once gripped his heart begin to thaw, replaced by a warmth that grew each day, a warmth that came not from grand promises or carefully crafted illusions, but from the quiet honesty of a life lived in service of others, in the gentle kindness that Elena carried within her. The children came to love Jamal, their laughter bright as they ran to greet him each morning, their small hands tugging at his as they pulled him toward their games, their stories, their discoveries of the day. He would lift them onto his shoulders, their laughter ringing out as they reached for the leaves of the trees, their smiles wide, unburdened by the weight of the world, reminding him of the simple joys that life could hold. They called him Uncle Jamal, their voices filled with trust, their eyes bright with the innocence of children who believed in the goodness of the world, who saw in him not a man who had once been betrayed, but a man who was there, present, willing to listen, willing to play, willing to care. As the days turned into weeks, Jamal found himself looking forward to the mornings, to the laughter of the children, to the quiet conversations with Elena, to the simple meals shared in the small courtyard of the orphanage, the warm bread, the fresh fruit, the soft breeze carrying the scent of the river as they sat together, the world quiet around them. He found himself helping with repairs around the building, painting the walls with the children, planting flowers along the fence, fixing the leaks in the roof, each act a step toward reclaiming the parts of himself that had been lost in the noise and the betrayal of the past. Elena watched him, her eyes soft, her smile quiet, seeing the way he moved among the children, the way he listened, the way he allowed himself to be present, to be gentle, to be kind. She did not ask about his past, did not pry into the life he had left behind, but instead accepted him as he was, here and now, a man who had chosen to be present, to give, to heal. And in her acceptance, Jamal found the freedom to let go, to release the weight he had carried, to forgive himself for the trust he had once placed in the wrong person, to believe again in the possibility of love that was quiet, that was true, that did not need grand gestures or promises whispered in the dark, but was found in the simple moments of shared silence, in the soft laughter of children, in the warmth of a hand held in the fading light of the day. One evening, as the sun set and the children drifted to sleep, Jamal and Elena sat together by the river, the water reflecting the soft colors of the dusk, the breeze cool against their skin. They did not speak, allowing the silence to stretch between them, comfortable, unhurried, filled with the quiet understanding of two people who had found a moment of peace in a world that often offered so little. Elena reached for his hand, her fingers warm against his, her touch light, and Jamal turned to her, his eyes meeting hers, seeing the kindness, the strength, the quiet love that she offered without words. In that moment, Jamal understood that love was not found in the promises made in grand halls or in the glitter of diamonds under the lights of a chandelier, but in the quiet moments shared in the softness of dusk, in the laughter of children, in the warmth of a hand held without expectation, without demands, without pretense. It was found in the small acts of kindness, in the shared silences, in the willingness to be present, to be honest, to be real. And as he looked into Elena's eyes, as he felt the warmth of her hand in his, Jamal allowed himself to believe in love again, in the possibility of a future built not on illusions, but on the quiet strength of truth, on the gentle foundation of kindness, on the shared promise of two people willing to build a life together, one quiet, honest moment at a time. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Share this video with someone who needs to see it, and check out our other videos for more inspiring stories you won't want to miss.